There are different kinds, the good kind and the bad. What's the bad kind? You've seen that well enough. Podkin knew she was talking about the Gorm. To confirm it, Bridget took down one of the strange tapestries from her wall and handed it to him. It showed a circle made up of two snakes, each one eating the body of the other. One was a scaled sea monster with fins and spines, brutal but impressive. The other was a twisted metal thing, all jagged and sharp. The two types of magic, Bridget said. Natural magic and dark iron magic. The world is made up of the two, but they balance each other like this, always eating each other, neither one ever winning. At least that's how it's supposed to be. Why the two? Podkin asked. Why can't there just be natural magic that doesn't want to hurt anyone? In answer, Bridget went to one of her teetering shelves and took down a carving. It was of two doe rabbits standing arm in arm. Podkin recognised one from the garland of flowers around her neck and the little chicks and birds that peeped out from the folds of her dress. The goddess Estra, bringer of all life. The other rabbit looked much more stern. She clenched a fearsome bow, and her robe was singed around the middle by a belt made of tiny skulls. The twin sisters, Bridget said, making a strange gesture in the air with her paw. Estra and Nixa, goddess of life and death. Podkin stared at the carving, running his fingers over the worked, polished wood. I've heard of the goddess, of course, he said, and I think I remember learning there was someone who took you to the land beyond when you died, but we didn't talk about that much back at home. Most rabbits in these parts don't, Bridget shook her head, but dying is as much part of life as living. Down south in the other lands, there's them that worship only Nixa. Funny bunch they are, my dear. I would tell you to stay clear of them, but... Podkin sensed that the old rabbit was about to go off on one of her strange ramblings again, so he interrupted with another question. What do the goddesses have to do with the Gorm, then? Well, said Bridget, taking the statue back, setting it carefully on the shelf. That there is the story at the beginning of everything. Will you tell it to me, please? Bridget huffed and puffed for a bit. There was nettle soup to make and a pile of acorns to shell for bread. But finally she took Podkin over to the hearth where Puka was busy playing with a heap of bones and pebbles. Paz followed too, and the pair of them sat down at Bridget's feet as though she was a bard telling a bedtime story. Right then, dearies, said Bridget, when she was comfortable. The story of the goddesses at the beginning of things, just how the old priestess at Redwater told it to me when I was a fluffy-eared kit. It is said by some that back when the world was dark and evil place, the whole of it, all lands, all seas, were covered by poisonous seething metal, an evil, wicked mass of horridness that was all part of one being, Gormalek, he was named, and he had eaten whatever was here before in his never-ending greed and gluttony. So there hangs our world, floating in space, all covered in nasty, living iron, and it would have stayed there too, cold and alone for all time, if it hadn't been for the goddesses. Sometime, goodness only knows how long ago, the goddesses stumbled upon our world and decided it was a place for them. Perhaps they could see through the swirling poison of the Gormalek to see what was beneath. But perhaps they had known the place as it was before he got control of it. Who knows? Anyway, they wanted to stop here, and a good job for us they did. The only problem was how to get rid of him that was gobbling up the place with his stink and poison and nasty iron evilness. First of all, they called to him and asked if he wouldn't mind jiggering off somewhere else. Of course, he says, "No, not for all the carrots in my back garden," or something like that. The next plan then was to challenge him to a contest, winner takes all sort of thing. Estra, the goddess, chose a game of dice, foxpaw she called it, and she trounced old Gormalek. Nixa went next and challenged the evil creature to a contest of archery, and needless to say, he lost. Nobody can fire a bow and arrow like Nixa. She never misses, and she will all find out when she comes for us at the end of the time. Finally, it was Gormalek's turn. He simply wanted to fight, and, being several thousand times bigger and meaner than those two dainty does, he bashed and beat them to bits. Well, the end result of all the competing was that nobody had really won. None of them was best pleased, but they realised that they had reached a stalemate, so they came to an agreement. The goddesses would rule the surface of the world, bringing life and death back to it, as it was before. Gormalek would go deep underground, where iron and all the other metals had come from anyway, and between them they would share the place. They called their agreement the balance, and promised each other they would abide by it from then until the end of time. And that is how the story goes. Bridget dipped a clay cup into a water bowl that sat by the fire and took a long drink. Bless my ears. That's the most I've spoken in decades. So, Gormalek is the one creating the Gorm? Podkin said, his voice almost a whisper. Because he wants the world back again, do you think? But that means the balance is broken. Because the Gorm are winning now, aren't they? They are. The balance is indeed broken, my dear. They found some way to wiggle out of it. They're growing in power. The old magic of the goddesses is under threat. Podkin looked over to where Starclaw and Bridget's sickle lay together on the kitchen bench.